We send the good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Kevin Klein. I'm the founder of Tech Ranch and wanted to go ahead and welcome you as we talk today as an extension of the Tech Ranch program called the Venture Outfitter Weekly, Strategies and Trends, the Evolution of the Semiconductor Industry in Austin. And part of what we're going to be talking about is Austin, but it's really the story to be told is not just Austin. There's more of a much more important effect that we want to talk about what's happening more generally in the world, and specifically between Texas and Mexico, with Austin being kind of one of the leaders in the area. I would like to say thank you to the government of the state of Chihuahua for sponsoring this and working with our partners, Chihuahua Global and Frente Norte. Frente Norte is an organization that supports businesses between the frontier of Mexico to Texas, and Chihuahua Global does the same thing for economic development, foreign direct investment in Chihuahua. So welcome to everyone. We'll hop right in. Now, today is going to be, as you've seen with many of the Venture Outfitter programs, we like to have a very conversational style, and the two individuals that are speaking here today are very much follow that Austin style of interaction on all that sort of stuff. I love that style, and so we'll stick to that as well. Part of what I'd like to do is make sure that we hop right in, and if you have questions, we will take questions towards the end, but if you want to go ahead and pop something into the chat, if you're in the live audience, feel free. If you're watching on one of the other end points, you can actually do that as well. If you're in one of the live streams, we'll make it a point to have someone looking for questions on the live streams, and you can post there. There will be a little bit of a delay because of the way the live streams work, but feel free to text those questions in, and then we'll take questions live via audio towards the end. But so let's set the context. There's a lot of activity happening. President Biden, wants to boost chip manufacturing, and he needs Mexico's help to do it. This is a Fortune magazine from last year. This year, there's been a lot of announcements by the State Department. The following that you see on the lower right of the screen is talking about these new partnerships with Mexico to explore semiconductor supply chain. Part of what we're here to talk about is externalizing what's happening to Texas, with one of the primary opportunities being tying Texas and Mexico together. Now, obviously, there's a lot of semiconductor activity happening all across the United States. Here in the Austin area, just one of the investments alone is a $45 billion investment that the US government and Samsung are making into chip production just about 20 minutes north of where I'm sitting by car. And so real excited about what happens. My whole experience in the chip world, I've always been an innovator, but I did get to work at Motorola in the APRDL lab years ago, Advanced Products and Research Development Labs. And it's amazing what's happening regionally with regards to semiconductors. And then all of a sudden, these level of investments and what's happening, there's lots of opportunity for entrepreneurs, which those of you all that know me know that, my primary concern is, okay, it's great that we have these large organizations, they're making these massive investments. How do we make sure that the entrepreneurial community gets involved in the opportunities that are happening? Because there's such massive investment that it's interesting to think about what might be possible more generally across the spectrum. And in my case, this idea of building businesses that tie Mexico and Texas together is a fundamental part. This is a picture of me in Guadalajara, Mexico, working on site with my first customer for my first startup. Happened to be a bank, and we happened to have an emerging technology. It was a database technology that was very advanced at the time. And the bank took this, one of the reasons that I'm so bullish about Mexico is this bank took a risk on me as an entrepreneur with my first startup. Now, the project ended up being wildly successful, but the story that I'm really trying to tell is not one of myself, but about how by working across borders with emerging technology, we can create all sorts of opportunities that we wouldn't have seen if we're just sitting at home. If I hadn't been willing to do that, the business in Mexico 30 years ago, back when I had hair and all the other things, trappings of youth. The main thing that I want to say is that this is the opportunity that I personally see.
Hey, we were not
As
the reason you don't have hair, man.
let's see, tell you what, Declan, if you can help us clean up the audio, and anyone that's out there, please do your best to stay on mute. But every once in a while, it's great to see someone say, "Hey." All right, well, back to this. So, this is the key story that we want to focus on about how can we take this unique opportunity in time where there's massive investments in North America, not just the United States, but North America, which I include Mexico as part of North America, to really plug in and create the opportunities that I happen to have that are reflected in the picture before you of how emerging technology and startups and scale-up companies could plug into these value chains. And you know what? The most important thing is to know that this is critical to being successful. These massive investments won't happen unless we have people like the guy in the photo taking risk at the in the emerging technology areas around the picture. So that kind of sets a little bit of a tone for what we're here to talk about. Now as I mentioned, we're focusing on Austin with part of the process, but we're going to hear from Angela, a little bit from Robb and from Drew on different aspects of this overall notion. And with one of the most important goals being to create interfaces to create, the guy, the picture of me 30 years ago, getting the way to plug in. So, as I mentioned earlier, since we've just had some people join in the live streams as well as in the live audience in Zoom, if you have questions, it's fine for you to go ahead and type them into the chat. We'll do our best to manage those conversations to be listening in. But yeah, put them into the chat. And please, if you do it in the live chat, don't do it just to me. Do it to the group. So that way people can see them in the group. And one of my team members will actually be help capturing those. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick it off. Enough talk from Kevin. First person that we're going to hear from is Angela Pack-Zia. I've known Angela for more than a decade. She's a really gifted business consultant that's worked in a variety of different firms across. And one of the things that really stands out about the work that she's done is working cross-border, working in emerging technology in a variety of different areas. Everything like you see here in energy policy to semiconductors to electronics, as well as some educational additions as well. We'll hear from her. What we're going to do is I'm going to go through all three of the groups, and then I'm going to actually ask each one of them to say a little bit more about their backgrounds, and they're going to be sharing a little bit of insight in slides and stuff like that, and then we'll have a general discussion. Drew Shirleby has, again, been a long-term friend, and I met him originally when he was at the Austin Chamber of Commerce, vice president of the Austin Chamber of Commerce. He's the executive director of the National Security Innovation Council of Texas, where he is the interface between a lot of the defense architecture, like the Army Applications Lab, the Defense Innovation Unit that's based here in Austin. The Air Force has all sorts of interesting things. The Navy is doing really interesting innovation. But the real need for the NSIC, the National Security Innovation Council, is to be the interface between those entities, the state of Texas with regards to policy and things like that, and then the entrepreneurial teams, the people who are actually building, interfacing between those. It takes a really special point of view, and Drew's background about being able to do these type of things, and originally at the chamber and now at NSIC, as well as with the Texas Association of Business. He's been a really great interface for that. And the thing that he has done other projects that you've heard from us before, specifically on the policy directions. And so he'll be able to give you more of the background of that. Now, our third partner in the webinar today is Robb Misso. He's a successful entrepreneur. I've known him for about a decade as well. Been here in Austin during that time. What's really interesting about him is he just had a significant exit from one of the companies that he was driving, where he has been standing between electromobility and what's happening there. That is, batteries, motors, and things like that, everything you need for electric vehicles, as well as semiconductors. His company, the company that I'm referring to, is the one that actually had power systems on chips that would, mitigate all of the power that's happening that you have in an electric vehicle. Now, in the case of Robb, I have sad news. We have a fourth actor today that wasn't originally invited to our webinar, but is definitely playing a part. Governor Abbott, there's been some, I do not know the emergency that happened, but Governor Abbott, as an example, because of Robb's stature, pulled Robb into the Board of Regents of Texas State Technical College, as well as several other groups. And so I got a call from Robb just a little bit ago saying that he is legally obligated. He's not in trouble. He's not going to jail. No, he's going to some kind of official emergency board meeting, and he couldn't get out of it, and it was a little bit difficult. So thank you, Governor Abbott. I kind of wish that we'd gotten to do some stuff about that. What we're going to do specifically, and Robb is committed to doing, is there's going to be some questions that are more appropriate for the frame of entrepreneurship at the stage that he's been at. We'll be following up with some follow-up material specifically on what Robb had to say. We'll also have a little bit more about understanding what is the emergency meeting that happened. I'm sure there'll be publications about it, and we'll do a follow-up. If we have your email, if you signed up for the webinar through the Zoom link, we'll follow up with you with that information. And if there's specific questions that you'd like to ask Robb about, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to ask my team to get the LinkedIn profiles of all three of our speakers and post them into the chat so you can kind of get a sense. What I'd like to do is have the webinar go beyond the webinar, especially since Robb can't be here right now, and take advantage of that. So feel free. And we'll figure out what's happening with regards to the emergency meeting. I know that there's been a lot of investments, and we might even hear a little bit more from Drew about the one of the boards that's driving the Texas CHIPS Act. We'll find out more about that. All right. Well, all that being said, I'm going to take us off of the screen, and we will limit that. And let me go ahead and have Angela, why don't you join me? And you first off, fill in the blank about your background that I did not cover, and then what I'd like to do is I know you have a presentation you'd like to do, but kind of give us a sense of who you are and your background and stuff like that first and foremost. By the way, you're on mute, and come on off. Okay, let me see. How about now? I think part of what
Okay.
my team must have locked down the speaking so we don't have anyone else interrupting the stream. But yeah, perfect.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Yes. And semiconductors, that industry is very close to my heart because that's how I ended up in Austin over 2 decades ago. I actually was hired originally by a distributor in electronic manufacturers, where I sold and spearheaded business development in Mexico and Houston and southern Texas. I spearheaded the development and ended up leading a sales team in selling everything from passive to semiconductors, and semiconductors again ranging from Samsung, what used to be Hyundai, Rohm, Micron, Xilinx, you name it, all these different types of manufacturers that are still big names today. I was involved with very early on, over 2 decades ago, and working in Mexico. So then I went to work for Toshiba Electronics, where I managed our sales reps and all of our high volume business for contract manufacturers in Mexico and Texas. And also worked for another company called Chemet Electronics, which is in passive components. And I was a global account manager for Dell and at the time Compaq, which was in Houston before it was bought out by HP. And I managed all of our distribution through throughout Central Texas and Houston. And with all of those parts that I worked with in the semiconductor and passive component industry, it was very much hands-on in also design and procurement. So we were working from the very, design engineers in, with the Dell computers or Southwest Research or Lockheed Martin. We're working with the design of what chips need to go on there to make the product they want, and then how to supply that. So the procurement part of it, making sure that the supply was there when they needed it. And that was from the small supplies through distribution to the large high volume supplies in the manufacturing production. So now I've also been in this industry, and Texas, Austin is, Texas in general is kind of the birthplace of semiconductors in many ways with Texas Instruments, and with the UT of Austin, it has continued to thrive and be a leader in the semiconductor industry. And I am married into the semiconductor industry. My husband, who I worked with, who was my competitor when I was at Toshiba, he is now a fellow at AMD. And is actually very much in the leading cutting edge of the technology, working very closely with the architects and designs here in Austin, and developing that production through TSMC. So we're very excited. Thank you for having me. And I do have a presentation, but I'll let you, let me know when you would like me to present.
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll hear from Drew as well, and then yeah, I appreciate your background, especially for the audience that we're speaking to about bridging these industries across that border, right? You mentioned a little bit about it. Do you have another example of the activities that you've specifically helped between Texas and Mexico?
Oh, yes. So a lot of the contract manufacturing, the high volume manufacturing, at one point, there still is a lot being done along the borders and in Guadalajara and in different sections in Mexico. And I was in charge of making sure that we were engaged with the forecasts of what production. So these are contract manufacturers that are producing for Dell computers, HP, Qualcomm, anything from anything that has to do anything with consumer electronics. With high volume manufacturing, we had to understand what are we capturing, the amount of products that we want to capture, the percentage of our parts that are in the bill of materials, and then are we making sure that we supply that, because that's also part of it. If we can't supply, it's no point in capturing that percentage. So part of that was really staying on top of the forecast, working with the global account managers for like Dell Computers or Qualcomm or whatever large OEM manufacturer that was looking at the large design and making sure that we were indeed going to facilitate the production to make sure that they run smoothly. And so that was the big part of really bringing the OEM design and supply chain management on the Mexican side of the border.
That's perfect. That's perfect. Well, so that gives kind of everyone that or some of the individuals that are here specifically to look at those cross-border relationships. That's perfect. Let me do this. Why don't we switch over to Drew, and then we'll come back in a little bit, and Angela's going to go in a little bit more in depth with the presentation she has. And then let me mention to the individuals that are in the live stream, that are actually not in the live stream, but in the if you're in the Zoom call and you happen to get the invite from someone else that had already signed up, make sure you update your name, because there are about a dozen Mariana Ramirez's in there, and so that we can attach your name to your comment, make sure that you actually update your name so that we can actually know who's asking the question that we're seeing there. Okay, Drew, thank you for being here today. You're in Washington, D.C. right now. You were just telling us working on something certainly for policy. Tell us a little about what's happening in D.C. and then tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background so that our audience has kind of a sense of who's speaking today.
Sure, and I'll be pretty brief. Thank you for having us, Kevin. You're a great leader, and I appreciate the partnership and friendship. in DC for a series of meetings, and also the opportunity to celebrate the World Series win at the White House of the Texas Rangers baseball team last year. So I've worked on semiconductor issues over the last couple of decades, as you had mentioned, and had worked behind the scenes on some of the components of the U.S. CHIPS Act, the Texas CHIPS Act, and the formation of both the governor's semiconductor working group and the standing up of the Texas Semiconductor Innovation Consortium. Over.
Yeah, beautiful. So yeah, quite a lot of both a lot of business and policy experience. Any immediate reflections of like the from since you're right there on the spot in DC, anything you can I know a lot of times when I talk to you that you can't talk about stuff that's happening, but anything that you can give us kind of like from the thumbnail sketch of what's happening in DC today? Oh, you're on mute again. Let's see.
Yeah, so there's I mean, the Congress is out of session, but the U.S. Department of Commerce has been working this week, and people may have seen the discussion that the Secretary of Commerce, Gina Raimondo, had about the 80% of the addressable market. I shared this with you, Kevin, around advanced packaging. And so looking to international partners, I saw in the chat someone asking about the State Department September meeting about international supply chain partners and reshoring and nearshoring of these. So that is the Department of Commerce is doing a significant amount of work right now on some of those multi-billion-dollar investments and multi-hundred-million-dollar investments with international partners.
That's perfect. Yeah. In fact, let me so that I thought about putting a slide in there. There is an event in Mexico City on September 5th and September 6th that Secretary of State, U.S. Secretary of State Blinken had announced just a few weeks ago. I will be there, and I'm not sure yet if I'll be leading anyone else in a formal delegation from the Austin area, but I will personally be there. Whoever answered that came from one of the accounts that had the name Mariana tied to it, since it was probably a shared sign up. I would certainly enjoy meeting up with you there, and anyone that actually here's my voice about this as well. We will have kind of a rally point there. Let's do this. We'll go ahead and hop into some of their background material. We'll bring Angela back on. And thank you, Drew, for doing the work. From a standpoint of community leaders, Drew has been committed long term, and has been, I can say this as an entrepreneur who's been slugging it out. It's guys like him in the community that really make it possible. Community leaders like him that really make it possible for entrepreneurs like us to take the risk of building things and having our governments really listening. So thank you for the work that you do. All right, well, switching back to Angela, and Angela, you mentioned that you had a little kind of overview you wanted to give.
Yeah. And I think it will dovetail perfectly, because I think with what Drew offers, it can at least give an overview of what the semiconductor industry, highlight some of the things that some people who are not involved in the industry might not know. And then I think, and it's just set up some opportunities, strengths, weaknesses, and challenges moving forward. And I will set it up for Drew to answer some of those himself. So I can share my presentation.
Please go right ahead.
Okay. All right. So yeah, thank you very much. This is again just a general overview of the industry, and just providing some highlights. And I just wanted to start off because people who are not involved in the semiconductor industry might not realize the plethora of different types of semiconductors. So when we, a lot of people really got more involved in this, the concept of the semiconductor industry when there was a major shortage and they couldn't get their cars and so forth during the COVID pandemic. So I wanted to kind of just highlight that, or they think of CPUs or the graphic processors in their computers, and or they're very familiar with memory, but they don't realize that there are just millions of different types of transistors or integrated circuits that go into all these different types of electronics. And I just wanted to kind of highlight a general overview, commodity integrated circuits, analog circuits, these mixed, and some of the manufacturers that are known for each one. Memory like Samsung, Micron, NXP, and so forth. Microprocessors, obviously Intel, AMD, NVIDIA, Qualcomm, ARM, and graphic processing, NVIDIA, AMD, and Intel. So anyway, just to kind of start off with just getting that kind of a background understanding, and then also kind of separating the two between legacy chips and advanced chips. And I think that's important because we have to understand that there are different types. There's the cutting edge, which is often, when we think of fast microprocessors or for graphics, or we hear a lot about the AI computing data centers. That's the cutting edge, but we also have a large number of legacy chips that are still being built and used, and the large percentage of what is actually used in electronics today is actually legacy chips. And that was the big issue that came up during the COVID pandemic, because these legacy chips are dominated by APAC producers, and the ability to get them was severely hampered during the COVID pandemic. And I'll define a little bit more. Oops, I lost what happened here. Okay. A little bit more about that, but the ability of legacy chips I want to just kind of focus on is also because they've been around longer, they've been able to have, they've been designed to be able to meet specific specifications, especially for military defense and space and automotive industry. So you actually have specific specifications to be able to endure different extreme temperatures and conditions and longevity. And so you will have different specs, and those are primarily available in the legacy chips. So when we think of semiconductors, one of the things we have to also think about is there is this constant push for performance speed, power consumption is a big issue to try to maintain low power usage while increasing speed, and also addressing footprint, cost of manufacturing, but also cost of the component manufacturing, but also the cost of being able to put that easily and quickly on a printed circuit board, and packaging. So all of these things that I'm listing, they all are interconnected. Packaging designs help improve power consumption. It can help improve speed. It can reduce cost. Your footprint, obviously, you can put more in a smaller footprint that reduces the number of semiconductors that you would need if you can integrate more into one product. And so I like this particular graph because it shows you the trend in the number of transistors, the frequency, power consumption, also the number of core logic, and how it has continued to increase. But we've been able to kind of slow down a little bit of the power. So again, this trade-off of power and performance is very key, especially as we move into the advanced technology. And so kind of, again, providing a little bit of an overview, when we think of semiconductors, you have three kind of phases. You have the architecture design, you have the manufacturing, the fabrication, and then you have packaging. And companies like Intel and Samsung have fully integrated companies that do their own architecture design, manufacturing, and packaging. Companies like AMD, NVIDIA, Broadcom, and ARM, they're very strong in doing the design and architecture. So AMD, for example, here in Austin, they are always working on the next cutting edge technology in the design manufacturing to move it into design manufacturing. So they work closely with TSMC, which does most of their high-end technology to develop the process. And then once that process has been designed and tested, then they can go into fabrication. And packaging, TSMC, Samsung, as I mentioned, also does a lot of packaging. That's also somewhat integrated, and we'll see a little bit more into the technology of packaging as it's becoming more advanced, how that integration in the foundry part of it is going to be continuing to, I think, to be more integrated. So where are we today? The foundries, TSMC actually produces 80 to 90% of the world's advanced chips. They produce, what did I say over here, 62% of the world's chips. Samsung about 11%, and Global Foundries, SMIC, and UMC are kind of all together, like a neck to neck on who's the third largest. But when it comes to advanced manufacturing chips, TSMC is the leader. With respect to legacy chips, like I said, APAC region currently builds 90% of the legacy chips. The US currently, as combined with advanced and legacy, produces about 12%. We look at packaging, though, the US right now is only 3% share. So we've got a lot of work to catch up on with that. When we look again, I wanted to kind of give a little bit of difference between legacy chips and advanced chips. When we look at die size for transistors, we're looking at advanced chips, usually 5 nanometers and smaller. So right now, TSMC is on 2 nanometer for their leading cutting edge technology. Legacy chips, majority tend to be 16 nanometers or above. Global Foundries, which has been a strong leader in the foundry of legacy chips, it's primarily using 12 nanometer, and I know they're moving towards 10 nanometer. 10 nanometer to 5 nanometer is a great area. I think a lot of legacy chips are starting to move in that direction. But it's just going to taking a little bit of time. The real technology innovation, not only in transistor size, but also has been in packaging. And as I started looking more into the advanced packaging, I was really blown away by how much it has evolved in the past decade. I remember when, BGA, which is ball gate arrays, and flip chips were the big thing. And now we're moving into this 2.5D and 3D, where you're doing a lot of stacking and using a lot of interesting materials to bring more integration of these circuits. And the big issue, as I mentioned, power, it's also to help with cooling. So you're having to bring more power, more processing power together, but you also have to maintain ease of connection as well as functionality and maintaining it, the cooling, so it doesn't overheat. And I think the newer technology is quite impressive, and I can see why there's a lot more integration in the manufacturing of the component industry. Again, this is kind of another image of big 3D and 5D and 2.5D, where they're using a lot more organic base and interposers and glass-based interposers to kind of fan out and maintain connectivity, but also cooling the device. So this CHIP Act, as I mentioned, we've got a little bit of background to catch up on in local manufacturing. And I see this as a really great opportunity. The CHIPS and Science Act of 2022, I think there's $280 billion to boost R&D and manufacturing capabilities and capacity in semiconductors. And it's already being put to work. I think if I look at it from an economic standpoint, I think one of the big advantage is the fact that it's a decentralized approach, and it's putting a lot of focus on R&D and manufacturing capabilities for any US fab. So rather than just target specific companies, it is really saying this is what we want, and if you're willing to put the investment here, we will help you. So from an R&D standpoint, when you think of locally, I just learned about UT at Austin receiving, I guess it's slated to receive $440 million for focus on packaging, which we're part of the Texas Institute for Electronics. And Texas A&M is supposed to be receiving $200 million for quantum and artificial intelligence chip manufacturing. And another $26.4 million for a Center for Micro Devices and Systems. And I will say UT, and I mentioned that I'm married into this industry. My husband is a fellow at AMD, so he's always looking at where's the talent coming from to be able to bring into AMD for the next, work on the next cutting edge. And one of the things that when I asked him before, where does he find the best talent? UT Austin and University of Florida were the two areas they found that students from those two universities tend to have a stronger grasp of the semiconductor industry and the technology more than a lot of other universities in the area. So I thought that was interesting. We also have other projects like Purdue and Penn State. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg when we look at the amount of money that will go into more focused R&D in this area. The other area I think that's a strength of this is that there is a stated measurable goal to produce 20% of the global supply in advanced chips by 2030. And I think having that as a stated goal, it gives you something to measure. And we're already seeing the work of the Samsung fab in Taylor, an Intel fab in a suburb of Columbus. TSMC is looking to have its fabs in Phoenix, Arizona. Amkor is expanding its packaging facility in Arizona to serve TSMC and Apple. And Micron is investing in a leading edge fab for memory in Boise, Idaho. And that's just the beginning. We're also looking at updating legacy fabs and last generation fabs to get them up to speed so they can be more competitive in a global market. Texas Instruments putting their new 8mm wafer, moving from 6mm to 8mm. Micron and Global Foundries are both expanding. Global Foundries, like I said, is moving from 12 nanometer die to 10mm die. And Intel is also upgrading a number of their facilities. I put this in there. So some of the weaknesses that I think that could be a challenge is really more so in the legacy chips. And I think that's more of just making sure that we don't add economic distortions into like kind of over protectionist measures. So if we are giving funds, we do want to make sure that we're staying even in the legacy chips, like and as innovative as possible. So I think part of that is to really incentivize these manufacturers to stay on the front end of how to continue maybe improving automation, designing larger wafers, just to stay on top, even if they have to stay with the legacy chip, how to improve that production. The other part is looking at maybe working with distribution channels. And I'm, this is kind of thinking outside the box, but having worked in distribution and knowing the importance of having that supply on hand. A lot of these chips have a long lead time for manufacturing if you go to manufacture them. So having a connection or some kind of national safety net through Avnet or Arrow or TTI and passive components to ensure availability in case of crisis, kind of like what we have with our oil reserve. Maybe we have a contract with distribution channels to maintain a certain amount of in reserve in case of emergency. And the other option is to maintain that a certain percentage of chips that are being built are actually getting onto the board. So having a certain, so when we have our manufacturers in Mexico or in our partners that ensure a certain number of, or a certain percentage are actually being built in the US. That's a little harder, I think, to mandate, but depending on if we're looking at focusing on specialized chips, such as like, let's say, military or automotive standards, that specs that could actually be potentially very easy to accomplish. And then lastly is, you know, the area that I see challenges and opportunities. One is, I want to mention about industry talent. I think we are stated, I read 67,000, well, there's the 67,000 shortfall in the next couple of years to meet the demand that in semiconductor industry. And I think from a industry wide, just to get it up to support, I think we're lacking about 1 million people to be trained. So I think there's a lot of opportunities there, especially in people who have been in this industry. And I'll speak from experience. I've known a lot of people who've been in this industry who have masters in, you know, physics or electrical engineering, but they moved into product management or project management, and because the technology fabrication was no longer here, they ended up taking a less technical role. Well, after a decade of doing that, and the fact that this technology is constantly evolving, they quickly lose out. And so if there's some kind of a way to bring in technical skills back to these people who've been in management, who've been in this industry, I think having some kind of professional development project for industry vets would be a way to bring them back, because a lot of these people will not be able to be engaged in the latest technology, but they still have fundamentals of the industry. And I think within a professional development perspective, if we focus in on those people, we could probably bring those up to speed pretty quickly, as well as, you know, young talent and university training. When I think about Mexico as well, I also know that there are a lot of great talent and engineering capabilities, especially in the manufacturing of facilities and like PCB boards. I think that would be an opportunity to build them up and do quick training for them. Lastly, I'll just say the other part of the concern would be, if we're looking at from a national security, is also in passive components. We're talking a lot about semiconductors, but I was also part of for a passive component when tantalum was in shortage, and we had major halts on a lot of printed circuit board manufacturing because we couldn't get capacitors. So if we're looking from a national standpoint, from a national security standpoint, I think we need to also look at the possibility of bringing passive components back to the region as well. When I worked for Kemet did manufacturing in South Carolina and Mexico. And within a few years, due to a lot of industry moving to Asia, they closed up both plants in Mexico and their plant in South Carolina and moved everything to China. So bringing this industry back as well to complement the semiconductor industry, I think, is a great opportunity. And lastly, the other challenge I'll say in semiconductors, and I don't want to rain bad news, but I think it's something just to be aware of and to really spur on more R&D and innovation in this area, is that, yes, we can boast that we're going to have a TSMC facility coming in, and a 2 nanometer, 3 nanometer to be open in Arizona by 2028. And we're also looking at the 2 nanometer plant for Samsung opening up next year in Taylor. However, we have to remember TSMC is already doing 2 nanometer in Taiwan. By the time it opens up, we're already going to be a generation behind And then Samsung, yes, will have a 2 nanometer, but right now Samsung technology is way far behind TSMC in yield and capabilities.
So,
I
so
think
Angela, let me, if you don't mind, because you're stepping into the national security area. I'd like to go ahead and bring in, just from the standpoint of just as we manage the time we have, Drew. Why don't you weigh in on this? Because I know that that's partially what you're all about as well. I mean, because part of what you've been organizing around is specifically I think Angela makes a good point about these passive components that we just sent to Asia. And then like right now, especially as we talk about the opportunity between Texas and Mexico, this advanced packaging, the opportunity that this event in September 6th, 5th and 6th is all about is, hey, how do we actually make this happen? Let me get Drew involved, and just thank you, Angela, for that background. Drew, give us a reflection from your point of view.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think Angela's
I think Angela teased it up really well. So
it's an
yeah.
excellent presentation, and she said it far better than I could. So I'll be brief. The biggest incentives provided from the Chips and Science Act were for leading edge technology. So Angela's, analysis of TSMC not putting its leading edge material here, I think is largely correct. They do have the global advantage at the moment. Samsung is close, but not ahead. And it's with some of the changes happening with Intel. They are still trying to catch up. That is what they are. That's where they're trying to roll the dice and make the big bets. A lot of what are attempting to be offset technologies that can help different types of companies to catch up. In College Station, there's a $10 billion proposed investment by Substrate to do some offsetting technology from a startup of all places. So I think I'm just kind of underscoring how correct Angela is. Over.
Well, so then let me ask you on one of the pieces that will break off into, I mean, obviously there's the issue about can what the investments that are being made here in Texas catch up to where things should be. I think that's a really critical conversation. The second one is, I know that on the assembly test and package questions that you both have referred to, Drew, historically, and then Angela, you just mentioned, I think 80% of ATP operations are happening in Asia right now, with a predominance in China, and there is this issue about stepping back. What do you think? Like, how do we navigate the complexities of what's happening right now to make sure that our friends in Mexico get to capture that? What do we need to do on the U.S. side? What do we need to do on the Mexico side? But I think both of you have reflections. Drew, if you could lead, that would be great. You're on mute again. I'm just going to encourage you both to.
I think it's happening. I'm not putting myself on mute, sir.
Okay, got it.
So, I think Mexico has been has been positioning itself well over the last 8 months. I think some of the early conversations did not include Mexico and are now, they're hosting, the CDMX is hosting the large conference with the U.S. State Department. There's new administration coming in. There's some kind of important decisions that the nation and the regions will be making on investment, predictability, energy, talent, transferability of credentials. But I think they're in a stronger position today than they were in January of this year. And, building on the strengths, working with those packaging companies that are already doing business today and figuring out what they can do to improve their supportive ecosystem is always a smart move in addition to the political work that's out there. Over.
Yeah, definitely. And I think everything from workforce development, supply chain tie-ins, even just at the most basic level, the cultural cues that, I mean, I'm proud that Texas, I think, gets Mexico more than like lots of other parts of the United States get Mexico and vice versa, right? There's a kinship that even on the cultural level. Angela, do you want to say something about that too? I mean, you've obviously stood between the two countries. And I'm not just saying just Texas and Mexico, but the United States and Mexico. Sorry, I'm a proud Texan. What other ways that you think we're going to have to manage these complexities to get this opportunity to really line up this supply chain?
Well, again, I'm drawing from my experience of being in the industry when we've had major shortages and other periods of time. So we've had major shocks. And I think part of where Mexico can be a big ally in is looking at, not when we look at our supply chain, I think we can over focus. We can't, semiconductors is part of it, but we have to also look at what are we really looking at? We're looking at the ability to build defense, automotive, leading edge, EV machines, there's a whole host. And I think when we look at the large, what is the objective here? We can broaden our focus quite a bit and look at what are all the other parts that need to be in place. And so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to also bring in the fact that the legacy components is a real big concern. And that was what kind of prompted everybody to say, wait a minute, we couldn't build automotives because, I think 1,700, they require each one 1,700 different semiconductors, and those were all being built in Asia. So even if we want to say, let's start where we can right now and start really developing the legacy supply chain and integrating, because that's the easy part, right? I mean, the chips are less, they're less technologically advanced, so we don't have to worry about the R&D right now, but we really have to work on cost and competitiveness on a global scale. But then we can also look at how to continue to innovate in that area. So I think if we look at that area right now, that's the low-hanging fruit where we can really start working. Materials, like I said, I lived through the tantalum shortage, and we were looking at trying to buy our own mines so that we could have tantalum to produce tantalum capacitors. I think looking broadly and looking at where we can work together is probably where we will win the most.
And that is the key question, right? To really take advantage of the opportunity that's presented to especially, and I know that I focus on Texas and Mexico. I know that we have conversations going on in support of what this overall set of activities about in Arizona, New Mexico right now, Florida, as well as New York. New York has some of the most advanced technologies and semiconductors happening as well. And from a Tech Branch standpoint, I'm not just a moderator, but also we have active projects that I want to make sure I advertise, advertise to, especially our partners in Chihuahua. But then I think it's going to take all of Mexico. I think it's going to take all of Mexico to really, I mean, when we look at like even on just packaging alone, and 80% of the packaging that's happening right now happening in China or Asia, but the predominance in China, it's going to take the, partnerships between the states on the other side of the border as well, so that American suppliers, American OEMs can actually plug in as well. I'm wondering if I know that we're going a little long. I've been really verbose. I appreciate you guys listening. Do we have questions? I'm trying to look at the different LinkedIn streaming and stuff like that. My screen's a little bit smaller than I usually have it configured. Do we have anyone that wants to verbally ask a question that's in our studio audience here in Zoom? If you do,
Last question.
Oh yeah, Fernando Alba, the
Yes.
Undersecretary of Economy in the state of Chihuahua. Please go right ahead, Fernando.
Yes. Well, first of all, congratulate the whole team for this conference. and especially Jim, Tim, and Angela. A great presentation. So what I want to ask you, Kevin, is for the whole group is, I mean, we've been talking about the defense and the opportunity for semiconductors there. So a few weeks ago, in the Semicon in San Francisco, I saw a very nice report on which, let's say, includes the, let's say, the aerospace companies tied to a specific program that could be the C-130 or a tank or the F-22 or the F-16, and then they link that specific program to a semiconductor company that is not that right now is in China. So the document that was quite interesting basically was asking how is it that the U.S. can uncouple from China if we have at least 100 companies, Chinese companies, that are making semiconductors for our, let's say, for our main companies, and also, how to say, products in the aerospace, in the defense sector. So someone was saying, well, we need to take a look to Mexico and Canada, because we need to bring back these semiconductors company to the Mexico, Canada, U.S. zone. So this is my question. I mean, how challenging will be to bring these companies here to Mexico, and what the role will be? I mean, what doors do we need to knock on? Who do we need to talk to? We know that right now there are some specific products, defense products are being made in Mexico, but the opportunity is huge. So this is my question.
Let me ask my panelists to respond to that. Drew, Angela?
Well, that's exactly what I was the point that I wanted to make is that the defense and automotive industry heavily relies on legacy chips. These are not the advanced chips that we see right now that's going into, the data centers and AI. We're talking about chips that have been around for a long time, but they've been tested and have specifications to be able to deal with extreme temperatures and durability. So the majority, like almost all of these chips today, are now made in Asia. So if we wanted to me, this is the low-hanging fruit that I was talking about, bringing back legacy chips, because that's already a production that we already have. We already have we know that capability. Bringing that to Mexico, working, and when we're talking about packaging, I showed the graph of how complicated for the AI, supercomputing and graphic processors are becoming way more complicated. But that's not necessarily the case for legacy chips. We have still advanced chip packaging, but not to the complications. So bringing that into mainstream manufacturing in Mexico would be an easier way to move forward with securing our supply. And I think that's working with companies like Global Foundries and other smaller or main other foundries could be a way to do that.
That's perfect.
Right now, Angela, right now, yeah, we right now we have, let's say, companies in Mexico that are basically focusing on the legacy chip sector, not on the advanced one, but as you say it, on the legacy ones, because they found out, and what we've been seeing is that, as you say, the low-hanging fruit are the legacy chips. So let's say that we have a state like Chihuahua that has a huge manufacturing sector. Let's say that we have a company that is making chips in Mexico that wants to get a bit more, let's say, deeper into the legacy chips. Let's say that we know what market we want to focus on. what do you, what will be your recommendation of what should have to be our first step in order to talk to the defense and say, you know, let us work with you on some of the chips, because we have already the infrastructure, let's say the support from the state.
So-
One last thing, I want to apologize. I say team, but it's Drew. Sorry, Drew. You're the man on this thing. So anyway, thank you for your representation today.
Well, perfect. Yeah, no, both of them have such a depth of experience and expertise in this. Angela, I think there was part of a question you were about to reflect back on to what Fernando said. Please go right ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to again, when I showed the graph about you have the architectural design, which is one step, and then you have the foundry that usually fabs the other. So what you have to do is really get foundries to invest in Mexico. And to move legacy foundries that might be already being used in one place to that. So Global Foundries is kind of looked at as the number three in foundries. Samsung is number 2. You know, everything is concentrated right now in a smaller group when it comes to manufacturing, just because of taking advantage of the scalability of production. So I think, getting fabs to move there is going to be your I think your key. And but I'm going to turn it over to Drew. I've spoken a lot too much, so I would like to hear from Drew's perspective.
Yeah, Drew, it looks like you're off of video right now. I don't know if you can come back on, or and totally understand if you can.
I haven't figured out how to do that, but I will just say that that I put a note in the chat for what that's worth, Fernando. I think Tech Ranch has laid out some pretty key components for engagement, and I think there's a ton of opportunity. But it's also, it's a point in time that will not be there in 5 years.
Well, and what Drew is referring to, he does know, and I'm not going to publicly announce this. There is an initiative at foot right now that if anyone that hears me has like a part that wants to plug in actively, please send me an email today or within the next 24 hours as longest. Kevin@techranchaustin.com. And if at all possible, copy my assistant, Emma. Her email address is ea@techranchaustin.com. I know that earlier on in the chat, Dr. Morales and I were interacting a little bit. I owe you a follow-up. Dr. Morales, for those of y'all that don't know, runs the AI Center in Juarez, and I got to meet him in February of this year. I know that we should be talking, but there are other initiatives that were tied to Mariana's name that are in the chat that if you can, take whatever you wrote and make sure you send it to us. I don't mean just Dr. Morales. I think there were several different people who made points of interaction there. We are working with the Secretary of Economy and with Fernando Alba there on some proposals for what's going to be happening in Chihuahua. And I think that there is a bigger opportunity just because the sheer amount of movement that's going to be required to capture this. And it's not just in the defense related stuff. A lot of times, Angela pointed this out, and I just want to make sure I double down on this, that defense is not necessarily things that are going into, one of the reasons that the US has enjoyed such a strong history is not because we've got interesting, military industrial complex. It's because we have the commercial sector that makes the base of this so strong. So I want to make sure we point to that as well, that, a lot of times we're not just talking about the things that are going to go into the F-16s. It's back to what Angela is saying about those passive components, the other things that make this phone that's in front of me right now is not just one big chip. It's got lots of other things that we need to put together there. I'm just wondering, I'd like to go ahead. I know we're going over just a little bit over our time. I'd like to make sure I make a space for Angela and for Drew to give like a really quick statement on wrapping up. And then real quick, I've been asked several times about slides. I'll ask Angela if she'll share her slides. Certainly this recording will be published onto the Venture Outfitter Weekly YouTube channel, and it will be available for reference into the future. And then we will do some follow-up in the private community areas of the site as well. So for those of y'all that are part of the Tech Ranch community, if you want to be a part of the Tech Ranch community really quick, I will just tell you, go to techranch.com/connect. And there's techranch.com/connect. There's also different plugin points to get there. If you want to get on our radar from a standpoint of just, making sure that we know about your venture or whatever you're up to, techranch.com/contact are the two primary URLs to get involved in the Tech Ranch. All right, with that, let me hand it back to we'll have why don't we start with Drew, and then we'll do a minute with Angela, and then I'll say some final words, and we'll tie a bow around it. Drew.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the important discussion. You've got a great group of people that are on the net, and it's critically important to the future of all of advanced technology, and having a resilient supply chain is in our nation's best interest, and having our allies and partners as part of the solution has some significant additional positive benefits. So just glad to be able to scope out where possible areas for those kinds of partnerships. And thanks, Kevin, for all that you do for Austin and Texas and for the United States and the world.
Thank you, Drew. Thank you very much. Angela, how about yourself? Any closing words?
Yeah, I'll echo Drew's sentiments. Thank you, Kevin, for organizing this and for inviting us. And I thank you for all the participants who joined in. And yeah, I'm just happy to be able to share and excited that this is back in the forefront of the conversation. I think we're moving in the right direction. It's just going to take some time to get us up to speed.
Yeah, perfect. Well, yeah, I'll echo the same sentiment. And what we'll do is, as we close, thank you to Angela, thank you to Drew, thank you to Robb as well. He was really, really upset that he didn't have control of his schedule, and we'll make sure that his voice is coordinated into what's going to happen from here on out, because obviously the opportunity is so vast, and the opportunity to tie our neighbors in Mexico, and Chihuahua especially, into the whole overall conversation of what's happening. There's all sorts of things that we can do with this inflection point in the industry's history that just wasn't possible a decade ago, right? And it's like Drew pointed out a while ago, this opportunity is here now. If we move fast, we can actually take advantage of it, and we should be doing that as neighbors and taking advantage of what's happening there. Follow-up points. If once again, I've got on the screen techranch.com/connect. You can get involved there. There's all sorts of different ways of plugging into the community, and we will publish even more. This video is already available on my LinkedIn. So if you go to LinkedIn and search for Kevin Coyne, you'll already have access to the video. We'll publish it as well as a YouTube onto our VO Weekly YouTube area. But once again, I just want to say thank you for everyone involved. Thank you to the Secretary of Economy of the state of Chihuahua in the project in taking a leadership position and helping really drive this conversation, because I, as a Texan, recognize that this is where things are going, and it's good to have strong partnerships across the border and work together. So with that, let's go do our best to change the world for the better together. Thank you all for your time today. We'll see you next time. Thank you.